Well, let's bring back the panel to talk about what we just witnessed at Rideau Hall. I'll begin with general impressions here, in particular the names that have been chosen to be part of this cabinet. Rob, what stands out for you?
Well, if you look at his priorities, as far as I was concerned, the priorities were national unity and the relationship with the United States and national prosperity. National unity, who is going to be the interlocutor with Alberta on getting its resources to market? And we see that it's Tim Hodgson. Important, former head of Hydro One. He knows the energy sector. He knows Mr. Carney very well. They both worked at Goldman Sachs, but Mr. Carney recruited him as an advisor at the Bank of Canada. So there's obviously a very close relationship between the two of them. So I thought that was noteworthy. In terms of the front bench to deal with the United States, there's been a swap between Anita Anand and Melanie Joly. So Anita Anand goes into foreign affairs. Melanie Joly goes to industry. She wants an industrial portfolio. She wanted to get some sort of economic pedigree going. She has leadership ambitions. She put those aside for Mr. Carney, but I don't think, given her age, that those ambitions have subsided entirely. In terms of the size of this cabinet, I noted that Mr. Trudeau's first cabinet was 31 people. Mr. Harper's was 26 people. There tends to be cabinet inflation over time. So if this is the smallest that Mr. Carney's cabinet is going to get, I don't think we can call it lean and focused, which is what the sobriquets were given to his first cabinet when it was, what was it, 24, 25 people?
Yeah, 26, I think.
That's right. So this is not lean and focused. I thought he might use the secretaries of state to be, in effect, managing directors. He comes from the business world. Managing directors run operations on a minute-by-minute basis, while cabinet ministers might have acted as a CEO. I don't see that, given the kinds of roles that the secretaries of state have. So not exactly lean and focused.
Yeah, not lean and focused. We'll pick up on a couple of the other points. Catherine, pour vous?
On avait dit que ça allait être un travail d'équilibriste que Mark Carney aurait eu à faire. Ben, je trouve qu'on le voit quand on regarde à peu près chaque région représentée, un peu moins l'Alberta, bien sûr, mais il y avait moins de candidats possibles. Donc, on dit 9 ministres ou secrétaires d'État au Québec, 14 en Ontario. Il y a un au Labrador, territoire du Nord-Ouest, etc. Donc, la plupart des régions semblent représenter 5 du côté de la Colombie-Britannique. On atteint la parité, 14 ministres, 14 femmes, 14 hommes, 15 bien sûr si on compte Mark Carney, mais reste qu'on est dans le 50-50. Donc, plusieurs nouveaux venus, quelques anciens. J'ai l'impression que, comme on le disait un peu plus tôt, on a réussi à maintenir un certain équilibre, à essayer de plaire à tous, pas déplaire à trop de monde, quoique c'est sûr qu'il y a des gens aujourd'hui qui sont chez eux et qui sont malheureux de ne pas avoir été nommés. Et on peut en nommer plusieurs, vous en nommez déjà plusieurs également. Andrew a parlé d'Élisabeth Brière au Québec, dans la région de Sherbrooke. C'est intéressant, Élisabeth Brière, qui n'est pas un gros nom, c'est pas un pilier du parti, mais c'est une loyale. Elle est là depuis un certain temps. On aurait pensé que peut-être, si elle n'allait pas obtenir une nomination comme ministre, peut-être comme secrétaire d'État, c'est pas le cas. Alors ça, c'est peut-être un peu étonnant, mais reste que on constate que ça a été un travail, comme je le disais, un peu d'équilibriste.
Laurie?
Well, this is a big group of people. I don't see this as like pared down at all. This is a big group of people. For better or for worse, we will see. I thought it was very interesting, just to pick up on some comments that Rob had made around Anand is now going to be part of that team who's going to be going down to the White House and having these visits and dealing with the whole Trump situation. And so when we saw Carney's visit to the Oval Office last week, I think it was last week. Time is moving very strangely now.
Month, yes.
And Melanie Joly was there. Like there is now going to be a change to that team, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of effect that has. But heck of a day for Anita Anand. You could see how happy she was. No one is happier than Champagne, I think. But you can see some of these people are just honestly seem very happy to be there. I think you can see, pretty clearly a team that's going to be focused on the Trump trade Canada-U.S. relationship issue, which Dominic LeBlanc is clearly going to be the key champion of. And then you can also see, I think, a team that would naturally crop up around national unity and internal trade and working on issues that will keep the country together throughout all of this. And then some of the appointments around things that the government has to do that are really important, that aren't necessarily totally front and center on one of those overlying issues. And so for Nova Scotia, like to have the Attorney General and Minister of Justice and also Minister for Immigration, key files that the government is going to be working on that, again, don't necessarily plug into those national unity or Canada-US themes, but are really important. So, yeah, I mean, again, a lot of people. We'll have to sit down and go through the list and try to come up with little groupings of them to remember who they all are, because it's a big list.
It is a big list. Geneviève?
Je vais continuer sur ce que Laurie a dit. Il y a de tout. Si on cherche quelque chose, on va le trouver. On a des gens qui sont là depuis longtemps, on a des nouveaux, on a récompensé ceux qui ont bien fait le travail, je pense à Anita Anand. Puis Gary Anandat Sangari, ça c'est une grosse promotion pour lui, de justice à sécurité publique. Il va être à la Maison-Blanche avec...
And I'm going to interrupt just for a second, because I was actually at the White House last week, and I was in the Oval Office when they were meeting, and there was Dominic LeBlanc, David McGuinty, you had François-Philippe Champagne and Melanie Joly, and, you know, thinking about today, it would be Anita Anand instead of Joly there, and it would be Ananda Sangari over McGuinty. So you're right, they will be the ones in the White House negotiating.
Oui. Mais M. McGuinty s'en va à la défense, donc ça peut être vu comme une promotion. La défense va être très importante aussi. Alors, il y a vraiment de tout. Il y a des nouvelles figures. Moi, Julie Dabrunsin de l'Ontario, environnement, ça va être la figure qui va parler. On la connaît pas. J'ai cru comprendre qu'elle parlait très bien français. Ça va être la nouvelle porte-parole en matière d'environnement. Alors, ça va être intéressant. Si je vois une déception, puis j'en vois une, vous allez peut-être me trouver difficile, c'est sur les langues officielles. Il y a personne à part Dominique Leblanc qui vient de l'extérieur du Québec, qui est un franco-canadien hors Québec. Et le portefeuille des langues officielles, c'est Stephen Kimbo, donc un Québécois. Je pense que les communautés francophones hors Québec vont être déçues. Surtout qu'au Conseil du Trésor, c'est Safkia Ali, un nouveau venu, et c'est le Conseil du Trésor qui doit maintenant mettre en œuvre la loi sur les langues officielles.
Particulièrement le Nouveau-Brunswick, peut-être, qui était extrêmement déçu de voir disparaître les langues officielles dans le cabinet d'urgence.
Ginette Petitpas-Taylor, qui n'est plus là. Ariel Kayabanga, qui a été nommé par Mark Carney, mais qui n'a pas gardé son ministère. Donc, je pense que alors, les langues officielles, j'ai un point d'interrogation. Je ne pense pas que ça va être une priorité de ce gouvernement-là.
So, and I think we're going to have to see the fallout of all of these choices, right? Because we're just getting the first blushes of it. And I will say a couple of things struck me, and among them was Marjorie Michel, because here is now the Minister of Health, a first-time parliamentarian, a huge portfolio. So that's something that I'll be watching very closely. Another thing that struck me, if you are creating a cabinet to signal change, in the front row was Leblanc, Joly, François-Philippe Champagne, Anand, Haidu, Guibault, Fraser, Freeland. That was the front row. So if you're trying to signal change, it was like, well, welcome back to 2015. So it was one of those signals for me. And the next observation I will say, and this is more a question mark, there are two Alberta MPs elected in this Commons. One makes it to cabinet, the other doesn't. Is that a tactical error given the challenge right now with Alberta on the national unity front, Rob?
It depends on whether or not Mr. Hodgson can deliver in terms of getting the resource to market. I suspect, given his reputation as a deal maker, a guy who knows business and a guy who knows the energy community, that there will be a great deal of confidence placed in him in terms of mollifying, placating, in some ways assuaging or attenuating the desire for independence or secession that's growing in Alberta. The other name that struck me was Gregor Robertson as Minister of Housing. This was an issue that the Conservatives gained considerable ground on over the last couple of years. They managed to, I think, attract a lot of new voters, younger voters between 30 and 45, people who feel like they've been priced out of the housing market. Mr. Robertson was mayor of Vancouver. Vancouver had a real problem with affordable housing, a real problem with homelessness, a problem with development charges as well, development taxes. He knows the problems. I'm not sure if he's developed solutions. So it'll be interesting to see if he can learn from some of the problems at Vancouver, one of the first cities in the country to deal with some real serious homelessness. If he can learn from that, because solutions weren't applied while he was mayor of Vancouver.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting choice. And when you talk about Gregor Robertson, he was also rumored as a possible environment minister rather than housing. But here he has housing as opposed to, Nate Erskine-Smith, who, as a backbencher, had a lot to say about housing. So I think that is most definitely a file that I'll be following very closely. In terms of you kind of raised some specific, or rather generalities, but in terms of specific portfolios, anyone that you'll be watching closely, Laurie?
Well, yeah, I mean, just to build on what you said about Robertson and housing, I think that's going to be really interesting. Erskine Smith's time as housing minister wasn't enough time for him to do anything. But the minister before that was Sean Fraser.
Yep.
And so that was a key issue for the Liberals that seemed to really contribute to the sense that they were tone deaf. That, and as we said, Pierre Poilievre gained a lot of traction on that issue by being responsive to it. And not at all suggesting that it's all Sean Fraser's fault. I'm just saying that this puts a very different lens on the issue. We know that Carney wants to create a new agency to deal with the federal government's involvement, working with the private sector to work on the federal government's involvement in the supply side of affordable housing. These are big promises that he's made around that key issue. And Robertson will come at it from a Vancouver perspective and also from a big city perspective, whereas Sean Fraser's riding is pretty rural Nova Scotia. And so I think that's one that I'll definitely be interested in to see how that one unfolds.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as they try to marry this idea of modular housing in urban centers that are already built up. I think that'll be interesting. I will point out the fact that we are taking one more look inside Rideau Hall because, as you can see, they're about to take the family portrait, if you will, of the 30th cabinet. You see there the Governor General in front, as well as the Prime Minister. At least you did. There's Sean Fraser, as you were talking about him earlier, Laurie. So we'll keep an eye on what's happening at Rideau Hall, but we'll wait for the camera to steady there so none of you get seasick at home. But we'll have that for you here as soon as it happens. And again, we are now counting down, or waiting for rather, the Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre to give his take on the cabinet that was just sworn in. But Catherine and Geneviève, I will say, François-Philippe Champagne chosen as the finance minister. We heard Marcy Surkes talk about the close relationship. There has to be some simpatico between the Prime Minister and that portfolio. But again, Carlos Leitão, he was rumored to be, in good running to be the finance minister overlooked here for François-Philippe Champagne.
Et il ne peut pas y avoir deux ministres des Finances, évidemment. Tout le monde ne peut pas être ministre, on le sait, mais c'est quand même quelque chose d'étonnant qui n'ait pas été considéré pour être... avoir un rôle pour être ministre des Finances ou autre. Là. Et c'est sûr que M. Champagne est devenu un incontournable. C'est devenu un pilier de ce gouvernement. Geneviève, vous serez sûrement d'accord avec ça. Mélanie Joly, M. Champagne, évidemment, là, ils ont des rôles majeurs. Même si Mélanie Joly a changé de rôle, reste que c'est maintenant des très gros noms. C'est
des gros noms. Je pense que Mme Joly va être contente de son nouveau portfolio. Là, où elle a un profil économique qu'elle voudrait développer. Monsieur Champagne, c'est majeur comme rôle. Les deux ont besoin de l'autre, c'est-à-dire que politiquement, Monsieur Champagne a donné beaucoup à Monsieur Carney. Là, Monsieur Carney donne quand même beaucoup à Monsieur Champagne. Souvent, le premier ministre puis le ministre des Finances ont une relation très serrée parce que le premier ministre a besoin des connaissances du ministre des Finances. Dans ce cas-ci, ça sera peut-être pas aussi fort. Ça va peut-être aller dans l'autre direction. C'est-à-dire que j'ai l'impression que M. Champagne pourrait peut-être être plus un exécutant de la pensée de M. Carney, mais je pense que M. Carney va être... on va le voir beaucoup en matière économique et financière.
Et, évidemment, c'est des spéculations. On peut se demander comment M. Leitão aurait été avec M. Carney, comment il se serait comporté. Est-ce qu'il lui aurait tenu tête davantage? On ne saura peut-être...
On ne le saura jamais. Puis moi, ce qui m'étonne, c'est qu'il n'ait pas été nommé secrétaire d'État. Oui. Ça aurait permis pour lui d'apprendre, parce que, comme ça a été mentionné, c'est difficile de se lancer tout de suite à un poste de ministre, surtout ministre des Finances. Et donc, de le voir comme secrétaire d'État, j'aurais pas été surprise. Surtout qu'il y en a un, je pense, c'est revenu ou dans les mêmes thèmes. Par contre, attendons les comités parlementaires. Alors là, le Parlement revient. On va avoir les secrétaires parlementaires aussi. Là, on va occuper des gens. On va avoir les présidents de comité. M. Leitão va être au comité des Finances, je ne peux pas croire. Et donc, comme M. Souza l'est actuellement, ou l'était. Alors, on verra la suite des choses. Mais effectivement, c'est un peu surprenant.
Well, yeah, and to your point, the Liberals do have a deep bench when it comes to finance and the ways you can deploy them. Marcy Cirque saying as much. And I do wonder, Rob, because you were here when Mark Carney was the Bank of Canada governor. And so when you look at his time as the Bank of Canada governor, I think it's safe to presume he's going to have a very deep interest in the way finance is actually run in this country. Finance, industry, any of the financial portfolios he's going to be very much interested in, if not involved in his own way. Do you think his time at the Bank of Canada gives us any type of insight as to how he might deploy those departments and those ministries as Prime Minister?
I would suggest that, unlike the last 9 or 10 years, we are going to have a Prime Minister who's going to be deeply involved in the finance and economic portfolios. I note with interest he created a full ministry for artificial intelligence. This is something that Mark Carney is passionate about. He believes, given our access to power, and clean power in particular, that Canada can be an AI superpower. That was an interesting creation in terms of a new ministry. But we were talking about Mr. Letao a little bit. Did he really run to be a backbencher? Did he really do that? I know Claude Gay a little bit. I know some people know him, and he didn't necessarily expect to go in. Even though he's chief executive at IBM Canada, he didn't expect to go into cabinet. I would love to have been a fly on the wall to overhear the discussions between Mr. Carney and Mr. Letao.
And knowing that he's not at the beginning of his career.
68 years old. Yeah. Although those of us in our 60s believe this, 60 is a new 40, of course. But did he really do that? Did he go back into politics to be? I'd be surprised. And I think Geneviève is right. I think he'd make an excellent chair of the Finance Committee, for instance. He might do that, or he may play some other economic role. Clearly, this is a man who did have the ear of the Prime Minister. I expect that he'll be playing some prominent economic role.
Yeah, and more than does he want, do you want to be a backbencher? Where with Mr. Gay, he could. There's an argument to be made. I'm learning the ropes of politics. I'm learning the ropes of Parliament. But in Mr. Letao's case, having come from the National Assembly in Quebec, he comes with his own political pedigree and his experience that he could bring to the table. So I think that adds to, and it does make me wonder. Whenever you have not a majority government in this case, but a near majority government in this case, but whenever you have this number of MPs, it is such a difficult balancing act of how you meet aspirations and not create resentments that come in and come out sideways in your government and gets you into trouble down the road. So it is one of the things I wonder about, including the former ministers in the Trudeau era who were competent ministers. So we'll see where that goes. There's also. I want to ask about the speed, because that was such a big part of Mr. Carney's election campaign, that change would be coming quickly, that we would be transforming this country at rates that we had never seen before. And it's a bit difficult because on the one hand we're watching this swearing-in ceremony, much like others that we have watched. Is there anything in place here that we see that can create that change, or is that change going to be Prime Minister Carney standing in the background and saying, do it faster, get the job done? When you look at the structure of this government, Laurie, does anything indicate that things are going to change as quickly as Mr. Carney promised it would?
I think it's hard to tell based on a list of ministers. I think once we see his approach to the cabinet committee structure, because I don't know at this point whether he's going to use a priorities and planning type thing. The approach where he's got ministers and then ministers of state seems to suggest to me, even though there's a whole bunch of people, that he's going to try to create some structure here where there are key decision makers and then there are people who perhaps meet less frequently and that kind of thing. And so I think once we see that, we'll be able to see where his priorities will start to be given expression. But I do think he's created these expectations around quick implementation. I think one of the key criticisms of the Trudeau government was lack of follow-through on implementation, though the ideas were great, right? Or maybe some people think that, some people don't. But so I think the pressure on Carney to do something quickly, I don't think he can go to the White House another time and not have a result, even though the first meeting seemed to set a good tone. So I think the expectations on him are going to be pretty high.
Expectations, which brings me to a point which I do want to raise in a moment, but I'm going to ask our control room to put up the image right now of the foyer of the House of Commons, because again, this is where we are going to hear from the Conservative leader. If we, there's the foyer. So we are expecting to hear from the Conservative leader. It was scheduled for 1 p.m. Eastern. We're now almost 7 minutes past that mark, so obviously delayed, but we'll bring you there as soon as it happens. And I know the people at this table have busy schedules, so I'm going to continue our discussion, but I'm going to do an advance thank you to Rob Russo, Geneviève Tellier, and Laurie Turnbull, because I know once Pierre Poilievre starts speaking, you're probably going to have to take off rather quickly. So that's my advance thank you to you. And Catherine, you don't get a reprieve. You're stuck here with me. So we'll bring Pierre Poilievre as soon as that begins. But I want to pick up on a point that you were talking about, Laurie, about expectations. Is there a greater pressure on this government, given the fact that Mr. Carney was able to essentially pull the Liberal Party out from near death to come back and deliver a government, again, near majority government. But on top of that, the threat of Donald Trump, because that was the backbone of his campaign, and the economic challenge, is there extra pressure on this government, unlike past governments? Geneviève?
Oui, pour moi, c'est clair. De la pression des Canadiens. Les Canadiens l'ont élu. La pression des Québécois qui ont renoncé à appuyer le Bloc québécois, puis qui ont dit on va appuyer les libéraux, mais on va le faire pour une raison, puis on veut des résultats. Puis déjà, la semaine passée, avec le voyage à Washington, M. Carney a déjà son premier problème, c'est oui, j'ai une bonne rencontre avec Donald Trump, mais qu'est-ce que je fais pour les gens qui perdent leur emploi? On commence à voir les indicateurs économiques qui sortent. On voit que le taux de chômage augmente. Alors, les gens qui perdent leur emploi, qui mettent sur pause toutes sortes de décisions, qu'est-ce que le gouvernement leur offre actuellement? Alors oui, il va falloir qu'ils agissent rapidement. Et malheureusement, pour M. Carney, il n'y a plus 4 ans devant lui, il y a peut-être 2 ans. Et donc, il va devoir aller encore plus vite. Est-ce qu'il va pouvoir tout faire? Peut-être pas. Il va peut-être devoir faire des décisions, de dire je vais aller dans tel secteur, mais pas tel autre secteur, parce que j'ai pas le temps de le faire. Mais je pense qu'il y a une grande pression. D'ailleurs, il veut présenter son budget, si j'ai bien compris, assez rapidement. On verra. Mais s'il présente son budget dans 2-3 semaines, ça va montrer que effectivement, il veut agir rapidement.
Mais jamais la menace envers le Canada n'a été aussi grande et n'est venue d'aussi proche que des États-Unis, le pays voisin. Il est normal que ce gouvernement ait une pression de performance. Les gens l'ont élu pour ça. Et la menace, elle est réelle et elle est grande. Alors, il faudra performer. C'est un gouvernement qui n'a pas le choix.
Laurie, what do you say about the pressure on this government?
I think that there's a sense that they've gotten this kind of extra mandate, right? It was almost like the Liberals were headed for sure defeat, perhaps disastrous defeat. And there was a certain, I think for some people, like they didn't get to the majority. They nearly did. But it's amazing from Carney's perspective he was able to do this, but still there's a sense of the Liberal government is being given a 4th term under a new leader because the circumstances we're in really require the leadership of this particular person. Like there's a sense of qualifier around it, I find. Like this is, and so I think you can hear in Carney's rhetoric as well, the focus on the crisis. We're in a crisis situation. And so he's using that framework to say, here are all the things I'm going to do, here are the approaches I'm going to take. And I think he will have quite a bit of license because of this crisis narrative, but at the same time, I think it really puts a lot of pressure on him to make progress on some of the things that people are really afraid about, and also things that they feel the Trudeau government didn't manage to get through.
Rob, what do you say about the pressure?
New governments come in and they have plans, and very soon they find out that Canada is a very difficult country to govern, and that things hit them that they never expect, whether they're economic crises or foreign policy crises. The threat to Canada is external and internal. The external threat is, of course, the tariffs from Mr. Trump and his designs on Canada. The internal threat is Alberta. So if you look at what he needs to do right away, he needs to come up with some sort of arrangement with Mr. Trump to either ease the tariffs or push them off for a little while we negotiate a new agreement. He needs to show Alberta. He's not going to build a pipeline while he's in office. Pipeline's a 5 to 10 year project, but he has to begin. He has to show good faith. At least one, probably 2 pipelines have to be approved, and construction has to begin. He will help the province of Ontario. There are lots of people who are going to lose their jobs in the automotive industry, welders, other people like that, who can be used to help build pipelines. So there's a couple of standards. what's coming at him. He's promised to do something about internal trade by July 1st. Before that, he's got to chair a G7 meeting where Donald Trump is coming to essentially shake the pillars right to their foundations of the world order that's brought us peace and prosperity over the last 80 years. Other than that, he doesn't have much to do, Mr. Carney.
All before the end of 2025. But yes.
Si je peux me permettre, qu'il va, pour ce qui est du dossier des pipelines, qui, selon lui, il le dit à plusieurs reprises, est un dossier essentiel, il va trouver le Bloc québécois sur sa route. Et ça ne sera pas facile. Il ne peut pas déplaire aux Québécois, il ne peut pas déplaire à l'Alberta. Alors, encore une fois, ça sera un travail d'arriver à jongler à travers tout ça, et ça ne sera pas facile.
Yeah, it's not easy, as you say. But although, I think we'll have to see that. What's interesting here, too, is new governments, you talk about they come in with big dreams. Generally speaking, new governments have a honeymoon period, and there tends to be a down period and a down time. Obviously not the case, because the election was just 2 weeks ago. We're now swearing in the government. We, as you mentioned, the G7, that's just a few weeks away. Parliament returns the week after next. So it's a packed timeline. So beyond the pressure, is there a grace period? Is there a honeymoon? Or is Mr. Carney up against the wall from day one, Geneviève?
Il va probablement avoir une période de lune de miel. Je pense que ça va exister. Mais il travaille très vite, ça n'arrête pas. Alors, tout de suite, on est parti. Est-ce que ça va raccourcir la période de la lune de miel parce qu'il va présenter des idées puis ça sera plus ou moins populaire? On le verra. Puis l'autre chose qui est frappante dans ces élections-ci, c'est qu'ils n'ont pas eu le temps de préparer un plan. Je veux dire, on a une plateforme assez bizarre, incomplète. Les chiffres ne sont pas bons. Il n'y a pas de vision claire. Je pense que M. Carney a sa vision, mais n'a pas pu l'expliquer puis l'articuler dans sa plateforme. Puis souvent, la plateforme est utilisée comme guide pour les premiers mois, la première année. Et là, il n'y a pas ça. Alors ça aussi, ça va venir l'embêter. J'ai l'impression que ce gouvernement-là, le danger qu'il guette, c'est de se disperser, de faire plusieurs choses en même temps, que ça ne soit pas ordonné. Et là, les gens vont commencer à se poser des questions. Où s'en va ce gouvernement-là? Alors effectivement, la lune de miel pourrait être plus courte cette fois-ci que normalement pour un gouvernement.
Yeah. And also, we don't know how long this government will last, right? It's aided by the fact that the Democrats right now have a struggle to figure out how they're going to move forward. The Conservatives have to sort out the not leadership question, but getting Pierre Poilievre back in the House of Commons.
I actually think it's going to be a very strong and stable minority government, to paraphrase Stephen Harper. He's a couple of votes shy. There doesn't his chief tormentors in Parliament. The Conservative Party has got to do some real soul-searching about its future. The New Democrats are doing some real soul-searching about its future as well. So honeymoon, no, because as soon as you make a decision, you're going to vex, frustrate, anger a large portion of the population. But in terms of the political danger to him, no one party holds the balance of power. He can make deals. I don't think the Conservatives would ever vote against anything that accelerates pipeline development, for instance. You make deals on each issue with a different party. So he should be fine, barring a major crisis, like the one that could be presented by a national unity crisis in Alberta. And even there, Mr. Poilievre is going to have to be very, very careful. He's running in Crowfoot, where there is a great deal of, I think, support for the notion of secession. He's going to have to be very clear, very early, that he disagrees with those in the province of Alberta, that Canada first, Canada last, Canada always wasn't just a slogan during the campaign.
Very quickly for both of you, honeymoon period pressure, whichever you wanted to address.
Peut-être, mais il y a aussi qu'il ne peut pas se permettre de faire des erreurs, M. Carney, notamment dans ses négociations avec les États-Unis. Parce que quoi? Parce que s'il se trompe, il arrive quoi? La menace est quand même grande. Donc, pas d'erreur dans la négociation, dans les tarifs. Il ne peut pas laisser tomber, il ne peut pas se tromper. Alors, évidemment, ça met de la pression énormément tout de suite. Et qui dit pression, dit probablement la fin. La fin, parce que normalement, la période de grâce, c'est une période où il n'y a pas de pression, une période où on laisse aller, on donne le bénéfice du doute. Est-ce que les gens vont lui donner le bénéfice du doute longtemps? Non, c'est impossible. Pas dans les circonstances. Geneviève, je ne sais pas si vous êtes d'accord avec ça, mais j'ai l'impression que les choses aussi... M. Carney veut aller vite, mais les choses vont aller vite pour lui également.
Oui, puis il y a toutes les autres crises auxquelles on n'a pas pensé. Puis je suis d'accord, le gouvernement va arriver à un plan, peut-être un plan, puis à un moment donné, il va arriver quelque chose qui va regarder la pandémie, qui a tout fait dérailler, tous les projets de tous les gouvernements. Bon, on ne sait pas ce qui va arriver cette fois-ci, mais oui, le temps va être un problème. Gouvernement minoritaire, je pense que oui, il va être stable pour au début, mais je pas sûr que ça va se durer très longtemps non plus. Les autres partis vont vouloir prendre leur revanche en se disant, bien, après 4 mandats, dont 3 minoritaires, les libéraux sont dus pour perdre. Alors, puis j'ai l'impression que, peu importe la durée du mandat, le gouvernement lui-même est en train de dire, moi, je gère pour 2 ans, je ne gère pas pour 4 ans. C'est probablement que ça n'arrivera pas, ce 4 ans-là. À moins... Oui.
Est-ce qu'il va vouloir lui-même déclencher des élections à un certain point? Est-ce qu'il pense qu'il pourrait avoir son mandat majoritaire à un certain point? Ça c'est fort possible.
Ça se peut, parce que Mark Carney, on ne le connaissait pas, puis là, on va apprendre à le connaître. Et l'autre chose, peut-être qu'il va devenir majoritaire, parce que il peut se passer plein de choses. Les gens démissionnent, quittent, et un nouveau siège, élection, un libéral, et on peut arriver. Ça s'est déjà produit sur la scène provinciale, donc c'est pas impossible.
Laurie, last word to you.
I don't think it's a honeymoon period for him as much as it is people are putting their trust in him. And it's very much based on the competence, the very unique skills and experiences that Carney has, as opposed to some kind of really like sentimental period. Like when we remember when Trudeau came in and it was this kind of sunny ways, people were happy. He went to GAC that day and he was like crowd surfing almost. It was, people were just kind of in love with him. And I don't think that that's the same feeling now. Even though you could see happiness today, there's a seriousness to it. And so I don't think it's a honeymoon period as much as it's that people are looking at him and thinking, I hope you're the guy who can get us out of this mess, because we need to start seeing how you're going to do that. And so I think it's a bit more like that.
Il faut voir aussi, vous en avez parlé, combien de temps les autres partis mettront pour se reconstruire, les néo-démocrates, même les conservateurs, même le Bloc qui a perdu beaucoup de sièges, qui a à penser ses plaies, à se demander pourquoi, à revoir peut-être sa relation avec le Parti québécois. Au Québec, il y a des élections qui s'en viennent dans 1 an et demi à peu près au Québec. Le Parti québécois a critiqué le Bloc, c'est peut-être une relation à revoir. Donc c'est sûr que pendant que les autres partis sont occupés à faire ça, ils vont peut-être mettre moins de pression sur le gouvernement, mais ça viendra assez rapidement, j'ai l'impression, quand même tôt ou tard.
Yeah, which may buy him some time, but as you point out, Rob, he has a lot of pressures to deal with in the interim, so a lot to be watching for.